And welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Dino Vidal, and today very excited to have my friend Ali Velshi, known from MSNBC's award-winning journalist. His show Velshi's on Saturday and Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time. And he's got a new book out, The Trump Indictments, the 91 criminal counts against the former president of the United States. Ali, welcome to Salon Talks.
Thank you very much. You know, you got the book there.
Right here.
And basically, I did this just because I've been carrying around these indictments with me like everybody else who needs them. I've got them in binders with tabs and all that. So now it's just like, it gives my back a break. I've got a small...
I can't wait for the sequel, The Prison Years. That's coming up forward to that one. So let's talk about it. Like, you wrote the foreword to a book that's the 4 indictments Donald Trump in various jurisdictions. What compelled you to go like, I want to write a foreword, I want to edit this, I want to be a part of this?
Well, it was a strange thing that when the first indictment came out, the Manhattan indictment, one of my colleagues suggested that we read it as a podcast. As part of the Prosecuting Donald Trump series, we have a podcast. I had no reason to think why not, but I certainly didn't think it was going to become a thing, and it really became a thing. There are a lot of people in this country who use podcasts and audio to get their information. So if they're driving or running or whatever, they wanted to hear it. And then as the other 3 indictments came down, I started reading them. They did very, very well. And then we realized that, look, people will need a reference point. There are 4 criminal trials at the moment, 91 indictments at the moment, and you're going to want to see what they are as these things go along, because you can tell even the time we're in now, one's happening here and a judge is ruling in that one. So it was a guidebook. It's a roadmap. And I am not one to think, you're a lawyer, I'm not one to think most people need to read legal documents, but these days I am. These days I'm one to think that these indictments are critical to our history. Whatever the outcome of this will affect our history, so it's important to do that. I even read, by the way, for my banned book podcast, the Constitution, because while the Constitution isn't banned, Donald Trump, you will recall, suggested suspending the Constitution. So my general view is just read these documents. It'll take a few hours out of your life, but you will at least understand what is charged. You'll understand the narrative. You'll understand the granularity. You'll understand the number of people involved, and you'll come away understanding that this wasn't, Rudy Giuliani booking the wrong place for a press conference with hair dye streaming down his face, looking like they all got out of a clown car, because that's the impression you might have. This was much more serious. This was a real effort to undermine democracy and not count votes and make votes not matter. The underpinning of our democracy was actually threatened by the people who have been charged. That's why I thought I wanted to put my name on this and have it out there.
In the D.C. indictment that Jack Smith charged Trump with 4 felonies, the thesis of that is that Donald Trump lost the election and wanted to remain in power.
Yes.
And everything flows from that.
Correct.
And it's a very powerful line. Now, you talk about people should read this. I agree. Yep. I've read them. I think it's compelling to read. Do you think Trump supporters will ever read it?
I don't know. I hope so. I mean, in the intro that I wrote, I certainly didn't write anything that should offend anybody, no matter your sensibilities or who you think is right or wrong. These are just indictments. There has not been a trial. There have not been jurors selected. Right. The trial may go in Donald Trump's favor. He is to be presumed innocent until tried by a jury of his peers. And I'm worried on on a daily basis that the prosecution or the judge will have a misstep that will allow people to say this isn't fair. If you are going to try the former president of your country who wants to be the president again, this needs to be super, super fair. And so many people lose faith in the idea that what a terrible thing for America that we've had to do this. This means our democracy is coming apart. Actually, in countries that have tried leaders, presidents, political leaders, former leaders, studies have indicated that they've come out stronger in the end for having tested the justice system, for having tested the political system, for having demonstrated that people will be held to account. So there's a little bit of me that says no matter what the outcome of these trials will be, America should be stronger at the end. Not all of me believes that, but some of me believes that.
We're going to find out. And as time goes on, we'll see. I mean, you talk about in the foreword that you wrote that America's the gold standard in terms of democracy.
Or at least there are many people in the world who believe that to be true, including Americans. This is the test of whether that's actually
I mean, do you think the fact that Donald Trump has been charged with crimes for attempting essentially a coup makes people around the world go like, okay, they take it seriously? Because until he was charged, it's like, what's the message to the world?
Yeah, I think there are two views of this, right? You've got Vladimir Putin, who's sort of saying America is the laughing stock.
Right.
But most people who watched the Trump years wondered about accountability, right? I had people, I would go to the Arab world where people would say this business about making your daughter this and your son-in-law that happens all the time here. We didn't think it happens for you. So the idea that there's some sort of accountability for some sort of the things. Remember, this is nowhere close to accountability for a lot of bad things that Donald Trump did. These were the 91 counts that sophisticated prosecutors were able to say we can probably win in court. That's it. So when you read these things, you'll realize there's stuff he's not charged with. There's also one very important thing he's not charged with, and it's on the second page of Jack Smith's indictment about the January 6th, the election overturning, in which he says Donald Trump had every right to deny the outcome of the election. He had every right to lie about the outcome of that election. He had every right to challenge it in court, to ask for recounts, to have audits done, and he did all of those things.
Yep.
Then it became something else. Then it became an effort to undermine democracy. This went from I'm protecting my rights as a candidate into something entirely different. And that, only in reading these documents will that transition be clear to you in your mind.
And you make a point in the forward, and I think that's such an important point, that it was not, at one point on the right, they were defending him going, he was just talking about stuff. Then it became so clear, it had nothing to do with the words. It had to do with the action.
If he was just talking about this, there wouldn't be indictments.
Right, exactly. So there's something else that you've talked a lot about on your show, and we've talked about it together on your show. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which would disqualify anyone who's engaged in an insurrection from holding federal or state office. You've really harped on it a lot for a while. You had a lot of different experts on to talk about it. What interested you in that?
Well, a few things, and I'm still talking about it, because I think at this point we have to exhaust all avenues for determining whether people who are involved in an insurrection can hold office. There's an interesting qualifier in the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and that is if you have sworn an oath to the country, to the Constitution.
Right.
If you're American born and you weren't in the military and you don't have a government job, you may have never sworn an oath, so this actually might not apply to you. I am a naturalized citizen, so I swore an oath, so I guess this applies to me. But the trick here is that it can only be enforced by someone who makes the decision to put your name on the ballot or not, which in most states is the Secretary of State, and you've been involved in an effort to get people to write to their Secretaries of State. But most Secretaries of State with whom we've spoken have said, I'm clearly not going to be the last word on how this goes down. So it's going to go to court. It'll probably end up at the Supreme Court. There are a lot of people in this country who do not have faith that this Supreme Court will act in the best interests of this nation. So it is in my view that we should dispense with this sooner than later. If this is going to be a thing, I don't want it being a thing next October as the election's coming up, or next September. I'd rather it be a thing before the first primary takes place. That's part of why I'm in on it. And I'm getting people like you and Judge Michael Ludig and Lawrence Tribe, who are all opining about where these things should happen and how they should happen. I do think that it's just not worth assuming that this is all going to work out in the courts and that someone's going to read the Constitution and say you can't run, or that Donald Trump is going to be disqualified, or that he runs and he loses. I think all of those things are pipe dreams. I think they're fever dreams. I think they're democratic fever dreams.
Yep.
We have a tool that the Ukrainians do not have. We do not require Patriot missiles for incoming missiles. We do not require people to go to the front and die for the preservation of their democracy. We only require people to know what's going on and vote, or help somebody register to vote. We need little things to be done. And I think everybody has to understand that it's battle stations on all fronts for democracy. Voting, organizing to vote, understanding what's going on, reading the indictments. You've just got to be smart about this. Every one of us knows somebody who thinks this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump. And you are not going to be better equipped to argue with them unless you know about this. And you're right, I did mention the 14th Amendment because you read everything. I know you always read everything. Yeah. Because it's going to turn out to be an important discussion here. Will Donald Trump be able to run for president? If he runs for president and wins, will he be able to assume office? It's a big and open question that still has to be determined.
It certainly does. And the 14th Amendment, if people were going to go like, well, let's not enforce it now, then what happens for the 22nd Amendment, which says he can't do another term? That's not self-executing either.
Right.
No one has ever litigated that.
Right.
There'll be all these questions about standing. So, look, it's going to be a fight if he gets back in. nothing in my being says he'll leave peacefully. He didn't leave peacefully in 2020.
Correct.
So why would he leave peacefully after
now
4
he's
more years?
told you about the things he's
Right.
going to do.
He'll
He
stay.
has talked about doing away with the Constitution. He has talked about the things that he would do, including suggesting that Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is a witness in one of these cases,
Yep.
as he would be because he was in the room where it happened, is guilty of treason and should be killed, should be executed. Yep. I mean, first of all, he tried, and without any trial, he's decided someone's guilty of treason and then decided what the penalty for that should be, despite the fact that there have been people who have been charged with sedition who worked on January 6th. Donald Trump's cognitive dissonance is amazing, but the rest of us shouldn't have it. The rest of us should not imagine that this is the year that it all changes, that Donald Trump, who has avoided accountability for all his life, is suddenly going to face the music on several fronts.
So let me ask you some questions regarding the media, because you're a part of the media, you do a great job on it. It's something we discussed before we came in here, and I have a radio show as well. A lot of my listeners, and you were mentioning some of your viewers, don't want to hear about Donald Trump.
Yes,
they don't want to see clips of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I adhered to that. I didn't want to hear him either. I don't think wishing him away, like wishing away any social struggle, any social ill, will cure it. It will not. So at this point, do you feel more of an obligation or responsibility to share with your viewers more and more?
I think you really have to curate. I play every time Donald Trump says something that sounds like Mussolini, right? Where he says, I am your retribution, right? Mussolini said, I am your avenger. When he talks, he used to say lock her up, which I thought was well out of bounds for talking about somebody who hadn't been charged with a criminal trial. Right. Lock her up is almost quaint now. Well, just lock her up. I mean, he talked about Milley getting capital punishment for treason. He talks about suspending the Constitution. He talks about the fact that there shouldn't be a Speaker of the House who's not willing to stop all funding for Ukraine, an ally fighting our greatest adversary. Donald Trump is saying all these things, and he's made it very clear that when he comes in, draining the swamp used to mean the deep state, the people who he claims existed in the civil service for a long time to their own interest. That was a lot of BS. But now it means something else. Now it means going after critics, people who are not sufficiently loyal, opposition members, and the media. And pretty soon everybody else. And that's what you have to realize, that it always starts this way, right? It starts with high-profile people. What is Rahul Gandhi, who is running against Modi in India? He's been charged with some financial crime. And most of these countries, it's a tax thing. Maria Ressa, Nobel Prize winner. Tax crimes. It's all tax crimes. That's how it goes. Because the average person doesn't know if they charge me with a tax crime, well, maybe he didn't do his taxes right, or maybe he did something wrong. But that's how it starts. It's harassment. It's stochastic. It's the idea that you don't have to get the government to take Dino Badala out. You just tell enough people where Dino Badala lives and how he's not sufficiently patriotic, and maybe he's an Arab and a Muslim and whatever. You just throw it all out there and let people do your dirty work. And we have seen in America, people will do that dirty work. It's not an American thing, by the way. This happened everywhere. It happened in Italy under Mussolini. It happened in Germany under Hitler. It happened in Rwanda. It happened in the Balkans, right? You let people form their own opinions and make sure they have weaponry, and they'll take care of it.
I had very personal things in 2017 when Trump was in office. I wrote an article criticizing his failure to denounce white supremacist terrorism before Charlottesville. The Daily Stormer, the neo-Nazis there fabricated tweets and said, go get him. And they said I was involved in a terrorist attack in England because I'm Muslim and all that kind of stuff. And you deal, and I sued them because that's what you do to Nazis.
And you're good at that. And the point is, you don't get scared by it.
No, you can't.
The problem is people who watch it may say, I don't want to go through what Dean's gone through. So there may be people who have views protected by the First Amendment in this country, critical of Trump or supportive of Donald Trump, who are just going to make decisions to not run for office, to not be a journalist, to not ask questions, to not bring things up, to not write things, to not say them, to not tweet them. That's where democracy dies.
It's a great point. So, there's a big question a lot of us have, and I think it's because the stakes are so high. We feel that when we watch the media, especially people we like, we don't care about Fox News, to be blunt, in that if you're on the left, you don't. You care about MS or CNN. Is there a way that the average person can have an impact on the content? And it generally is the idea of framing issues. For example, like Donald Trump's out on bail. Like, why don't they say Donald Trump, who's out on bail, is campaigning in Iowa today? But those kind of things, or even interviews of people like Donald Trump, we're going to see a lot more going on in the future. And that people are like, well, why aren't they harder on him? Or why don't they frame the issue like this? Can the average person have any impact on the content? Do people in the public media notice it?
I think that stuff is important because there are lots of ways to frame an issue, and it might not be the one you use every time, right?
Sure.
I often refer to Donald Trump as the twice-impeached, quadrupley-indicted, failed former president of the United States.
That's nice.
There are various ways that you can do this, and they may not all apply at all times, but understanding that is important because reminding people that he's out on bail would make the penny drop when his staff sort of seemed to be bragging about how he bought a gun last week. And most people, I don't know that most of my viewers or most people watching this have been arrested or are on bail, but we watch Chicago PD or Law and Order, and you know that you probably can't buy a gun while you are under indictment, which is a fact. But it was a wink and a nod. And so you do have to curate, and you have to not normalize craziness. And that's the same thing with what's going on in Congress right now. But with Donald Trump, you have to find ways, because he's numbing, right? You're all numb to it all. Nobody cares. When I said to people, did you see that Donald Trump bought a gun or tried to buy a gun or said he bought a gun? Most people hadn't, because they've tuned Donald Trump out. You can't tune somebody out who is deliberately pushing the norms of your society because he tried to the extent that it would have undermined democracy. You actually have to know that it's happening and say that it's happening. So my view is Donald Trump doesn't need to be on TV all the time. I get it, that it irritates people. He grates on people. But he could be the next president of the United States. And at the moment, he's becoming a martyr. And so we have to ensure that people understand the vitriol that comes out of his mouth, what it means, and what he could do with it if he actually had power once again. I say power once again. He seems to be the boss of Congress at the moment, right?
He almost seems to be president when you watch media coverage, to be blunt. Because President Biden is like a little bit, and it's Trump, 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 and then Biden.
Right.
Like a story about him being old.
So then the counter to this question is people who say to me, you should do more on Biden.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. It's not the media's job to carry water for anybody. I am very, very, very clear on the fact that for the moment, there appear to be two people running for president. There's a whole bunch of Republicans and some independents, but basically it's Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It's not 340 million Americans. This is not your choose your own adventure. It's one person who seems to be doing his presidential duties, and if we want to examine that, we can examine all the ways in which he seems to be doing them quite well, and another guy who doesn't seem to believe in democracy. That is entirely a binary choice. That's it.
Yep.
You can talk about who you'd like for president. Those do not appear to be your options right now. And so that's what you've got. I don't need to do PR for Joe Biden for you to understand that one of these guys is for democracy and the other one's not. That should be enough for an American to make their mind up. I'm not sure it will be, but it should be.
Do you think, though, in this day and age that the old ways of a president getting media coverage have faded because of the world we live in?
Yeah,
We've been changed by Donald Trump. So that a president just go in and have a press conference, like the old days, doesn't get much press.
It's like the old days. It never got press. It only ever got press during Donald Trump's time because he was going to fire his Secretary of State in that press conference accidentally, or ban transgender people in the military. Like Donald Trump couldn't stay on message for anything. So when he launched Infrastructure Week, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and we would cover it thinking that he was going to talk about Infrastructure Week, but then Kanye West would be involved. You never know what's going to happen. With Joe Biden, you actually fully know how it's going to go.
So does Biden have to be more creative? Do Democrats in general? I'm not trying to get you advice, but from someone in the media looking outwardly at them, do they have to be more creative in trying to get media coverage in the landscape that we live in today?
I think Democrats have got to acknowledge the elephant in the room, and that is that Joe Biden's having trouble despite what he's doing, and I can outline a lot of important things that he's doing on the economy and specifically with respect to Ukraine and dealing with international alliances and walking a tightrope with Israel and Saudi Arabia and India, 3 countries who I think we should be taking very strong lines with, but he is smarter than I am and more experienced than I am, so he's doing it a different way. The elephant in the room is that he's an older gentleman who comes across to some people as older than he is. He's just a few years older than Donald Trump.
3 years, yeah.
But I think we can't ignore it. We have got to discuss it. We've got to discuss what that means and what the implications are. I think the choice remains binary, but it would behoove Democrats to sort of just figure out what a good answer is to that, because I keep on meeting people who definitely don't want Donald Trump to be president, but say things like, I'm worried about Joe Biden. Now, my general view is that Joe Biden comes across that way mostly when he's reading a prompter. When Joe Biden's talking one-on-one about things about which he knows, he says what he believes. Often the White House tries to walk it back because he has seemed to have said too much, but he's actually usually right.
Yeah.
When he talks about Putin being a war criminal, when he talks about what Xi Jinping is going to face, when he talks about Modi. So I would sooner see a little bit more Joe Biden unplugged, because Joe Biden, the most unplugged he's ever going to be, is never going to be a problem when you're dealing with somebody like Donald Trump. I also think it doesn't pay Joe Biden to get involved in any Donald Trumpy stuff. Donald Trump will shoot himself in the foot or not himself.
Right. I do like that Biden last week, and he's going to make it a theme in 2024, the threat to democracy posed by
That
MAGA.
is correct, because he
that's
believes
important.
that. That's in his bones. That's not actually about Donald Trump specifically. Donald Trump is a piece of that, but the threat to democracy, I believe, is central, and I think if he leans into that, that's important.
And very last thing, touching on that the MAGA movement, or the Republican Party in general, is doing something we haven't seen before, and that's banning books. And
Amazing.
you've been covering it on your show.
Yeah.
Week after week, you have a podcast.
Yeah.
First of all, can you believe where we are, and how do you amplify this so people get this is not normal?
Yeah,
folks.
no, and it is 1933 Germany, and I
Yeah.
think people need to remember history. That this is when you start making people ignorant, or you do that, you are shepherding them towards something dangerous. You know, my family's from South Africa. My father, when he first saw my band book club, he texts me, every show. He said, growing up in South Africa, he left at the age of 25. He said, I didn't even know there were public libraries. Because for non-white people, there simply weren't. They weren't bothering to ban books. You just didn't get a library at all. You got what they told you could read at school, and that was the beginning and the end of the whole thing. I will say this, thank you to anybody from Moms for Liberty who's listening to this, because you have ignited people. You have caused regular people to understand their responsibilities as citizens, which is not all that complicated. As I said, vote, register to vote, show up at your teacher meetings, show up at your school board meetings, run for school student council, for school board, see who's running for school board, and maybe give them $25 or $50 for their campaign so someone will know their name. This is where it begins. They got smart by banning books at the very, very local level, and now people are getting smart by fighting banning books at the very, very local level. I think the book banners don't win this one.
And you're doing a great job, in fact, on amplifying that. So, Ali, I want to thank you for coming to Salon Talks. Again, the book, The Trump Indictments, that Ali has wrote the forward for. Ali, it's always great seeing you, and always great seeing you on your show on MSNBC.
Thanks
for being on
always
Salon
great
Talks.
to be with you.
Thank you.